Okay. Let's see who else is. I got two. Is that
That's usually Urja.
Urja? Let's see. Oh, there is Urja. So Spiro did predict it. So now he's getting pretty hip. So I guess we'll come to understand our system a bit better. They're coming again next week or something, and
Well, we're gonna get it wired in the house and get good internet all over within the next week or two. That's the next thing. First thing was to get a good connection, which we now have, and you're benefiting from currently.
okay. Well, hello everyone. Is Urja, you still there then? Huh? And that's
Yes,
me.
I am.
So you sounded very nice.
You know, it's beyond, like you say, reality is beyond fiction.
Yeah.
But somehow it's like things seems to come together. It has a lot to do with me not judging anything.
Let's say your energy was as an observer, that you could not be organized into participating in something that was again going to continue to hurt, that somehow your presence needed a heartfelt, honest conversation between people about who am I, where are we? It doesn't have to be literally that way, but you see Buddha moment.
Yes.
Where you no longer are the mother or this or that, but basically this period must be free. And free doesn't mean licensed running. It doesn't lay out what it means, but what it doesn't mean is repeating the story again.
And it seemed that love prevailed.
But it doesn't mean that but just seeing that story is ended for you. And seeing it, something changes in seeing it, not doing, not this or not
Right.
seeing it. You saw what was about to happen. And you saw that it was a kind of hurt that was about to connect and create another reality. And you also saw in seeing it, your presence then meant something. If they wanted you in it, then somehow it had to be no bullshit. It had to come from a straight, conscious, heartfelt. No more another repetition of this. So then it seemed to me, just a recognition in that, not even laying it out, but then even sitting on the couch, you could tell a joke, and all of a sudden something is shared that you couldn't get to for 20 years of discussion and praying and doing this and doing that. But then something happens. So I just felt, without making it too much, where there's a glimpse.
Yes.
And the glimpse is also that you are seeing the world also from the mystery and the history. And if the history is pulling you in, you can't be around bullshit this time, because the mystery is kind of sacred now. What is happening, even if it's a hurt neck and a nose and a head and all that, is still a beautiful process that comes with the process of living and dying. Mm-hmm. Where you're appreciating things from different perspectives, but doesn't have the same attachment to it.
Yeah.
And so somehow the story can be, an accident can release the story to a deeper sense of what it is. Where you see the shared life was a shared life in different bodies and different experiences, but it was one shared experience. I'm getting a phone call. What should I do? We get so many phony phone calls. Do you also get something like that? Yeah. Unless they announce, but that one looked like we won a lottery or something.
We got a phone for Tico last year, and the number, whoever it used to belong to, we know everything about this woman now, and he gets about 20 calls per day for her.
Yeah, wow. So this is, it's weirder and weirder. Let's see how this new computer stuff works here. But what do you say, Urja? Let's say we're regular people and living regular people's lives. So basically, if you look at each person's life literally, you see similarities through much of the population,
Yes.
where it seems almost like a whole movement is written into the story. But then as you visit the stories individually, and as you share that as an experience, you start then to see the other dynamic of the literal life that one has lived, and you start to see the energy or the creativity running through the life story. And so then you see the literal person, but then you also see the energy in the person navigating through the life as if it's in a journey or searching for something. So you see that there are many approaches that try to understand these features that are happening. But at the same time, there is a dedication to life as an individual with an identity and a history and a continuum. And yet you start to find that many people are not only built that way, that around an 8-hour day or a job-oriented day or this or that, or fighting for a nation or killing for this or something like that, that they're kind of going about their business in their life. And and there's something intelligent in going about one, but then you see that the forms that one goes through
Yes.
then becomes the reality. Okay. And so you see that once it assumes the literalness of a form, you understand in family, once it assumes the identity of survival, then you see friendship. It simulates friendship, but it reaches friendship and it's lost in some way in retrospect. When you meet the energies beyond the form.
Yeah.
But you also see that when there is even a feeling with mother and child, when there is that feeling there is a relaxation. And then sometimes when there's an argument, an intensity that then formulates between the people, even a muscular intensity when they meet or think of each other or see each other or whatever. So somehow there's evidence of an entwined life.
Mm-hmm.
It's reached through memory, it seems. But when one is viewing it, you see a similarity historically in each person. That while they're very different people, they're not very different people in certain ways. And it's not only a Freudian repetition or psychological construct or seemingly the body shape or something that is repeated, but you also see a yearning, a longing, a predisposition to some degree. And you see the remarkableness of life in its movements and how absent we are from how deep it is and simple it is simultaneously. The simplicity has such a complexity in it that the difference between exploring something and having the nuance, the sense of something,
Yes.
and acting out of intuition, you see, has a science to it also. But it's not the science in the same way of literalness. It has the science somehow of exploring the world through painting or writing, finding out more through your own writing about something, reviewing something that you've been through, allowed you to get a peep of another dimension of it.
It's very true.
The other dimension you have it is qualified to the extent that you're attached to the light. So you can only get a peep, so you'll do better next time or something like that. But there is also a move that sends you almost back to a death experience in some way, to the literalness, where you see the difference between death and dying. You see, somehow you return to the story having seen something. And so survival is no longer the dominant force, but that somehow it's soulful is an important aspect of the journey. And that means why? Because you're now coming from a different place when you re-enter the story. And the same is when you're trying to create something that's pure or deep. It's the difference between trying to make a buck and trying to explore yourself and reveal yourself with a kind of soul searching. Soul searching meant that. Making a buck is an assimilation of soul searching. That was if that became the motive. Because if survival was the motive, then the soul wouldn't reveal very much of itself. So somehow soul searching was an aspect where one kind of died to the literalness of survival in the life, where it's me surviving. But there's a reflection more than the ego can take. And it discovers a dimension of itself that was waiting for that discovery to happen. I feel then that that's all the journeys that we've tried, all the mantras that we've tried, all the things that we've tried, is a kind of dialogue with something that's essentially silent to us, but is activated under certain situations. But it does seem like the situations that are coming to us are not with motive. But something where it's almost as if there's a movie that touches you so deeply that you kind of have to be quiet to see it, and you give it some respect in some way, because somehow you are having a conversation with channeling certain feelings.
Very true.
Now you visit a world where channeling those feelings are the normal world. Not something that you're working towards, but is second nature to you now. So then you see what you embody. To others that you are bicycling down the street, Urja, you are an older woman and say, look at that old, they look out the window and say, look at that old lady on the bicycle. Is she going to faint? Is she going to die? Is she going to be healthy? Okay.
He
So,
always look elegant even on the bike.
so let's say you see it from the balcony. You see it from somebody who's looking at the balcony and say, holy shit, look at that old lady pedaling bicycles. Okay.
Absolutely, yeah.
Or Mary like biking into it and they say, holy shit, man, she's
Right.
zipping in and zipping out like that. Okay. So you see it from the balcony, looking at yourself, and you see the sheer movie of your life.
Yes. It's so true, Danny.
Because you're kind of in it, but not of it. And yet there is no doubt that as a person, when the pain in the neck comes, the pain in the neck comes.
Yes, it's always there.
What does it say then? The pain in the neck. Holy shit.
Well, now you have done enough for now. Just rest.
Okay, so I'm saying that one at the same time is visiting things that one ignored or avoided or this or that, but now is also visiting their body in a way.
Yeah.
That once it was explained to me that there was a cancer in the organs that can be so, before the immune system can become aware of it. The symptoms are so deep that it's really, the person is really sick before the body recognizes that it's sick. And that's often happening, okay. But then then I tried a treatment with them, which had a very homeopathic perspective in it, as I said, where they inserted in your body over 6 weeks in the bladder, this TB, watered down TB, it was called BCG, but somehow it activated the immune system to something that would, with that kind of cancer, would be very far in advance before the body would notice it. And somehow it went away for 16 years. So it was an interesting interaction. For me, it had a homeopathic premise. where a minute dosage, a microscopic dosage, alerted the body to something similar, and that was the basis originally of vaccine before it became alchemical, chemical production, and had big money behind it. Was a recognition that somehow a similar thing alerted the body's response. If you gave a small, minute dose of something that resembled the illness, that somehow the body built a system that would recognize it when it was coming around. So it was brilliant when it came. But then as it becomes systemically logical, what is our instinct for folks who, like us, like to live somewhat naturally, and that our relationship to the literal medical field is not, we take potions, this and that, we try. But what the underneath, and even if they sound silly, the underneath premise is that they're kind of pure or natural. And so even though that may seem naive, and even though they may work you and charge you for that, and the yearning for it or the desire for it is not exactly done. Because there is a perception then of a world that is becoming more and more mechanical, where the natural world is becoming more and more mechanical. Not even an abstract world that was more mechanical, but the very, and you just start to see somehow, if you see news or this or that, you see a kind of underlying sorrow running through the story. And it looks like it's because this issue, or because this family is killed, or it's bad going, or because they lost a house. But you see that there is a kind of sorrow running through the story. And it looks causal, that it's caused by this issue or that issue. But what the issue seems to be is that there's an inhumanity that runs through the story. And when it runs through the story, it awakens people to a horror show in their life. Because then you go into a world that not only are you living for, compelled to do, you're compelled to do by some rituals or structure or something like that, how to live.
Yes.
And so that means that most of your intelligent life is lived underground. And you discover, yes, that is in fact how it is through most of life. That most of the creative experiences came from friends or people who lived their own kind of lives and created from that. But they were not organized into the literal workaday existence. And I say, why? I say, because somehow work was associated with slavery. That somehow work was a natural part of one's living, not a job that they had that was separate from them. And so then you saw that there was a lot of dualities that would happen as people had to take jobs that they then had to hide from their families over what it was doing to them or this or that a duality started to develop between the expressions, when in fact the original healthier expressions was a shared experience. Then the question of family that has a job oriented and literalized that, the roles literalized. And so then in order to maintain a continuity, then people have to live in a suppression or a hidden life. In order to maintain the view in the family structure, one's aloneness may be aloneness in a deeper sense. So you see hidden in the family structure that seems to be unified is also a private yearning for each individual. And you also see that incidents will happen that will reveal the differences in that yearning. Is because what in the yearning life, it is not a shared life so easily. It is more one kept to oneself, or in the conversation is almost sacred. Only a friend can share it in certain levels or whatever. But once you become aware of a multidimensional life within your own life,
Yeah.
then you kind of become aware of a multidimensional situation that you're in, that it's changing. And it's changing because it's changing. It's not changing because this is happening or that is happening, because life is in flux. And so even the relationships that we have in the present is also in flux. But amazingly, it meets, it shares a moment. But flux means also that the physical aspect of it starts to shift. And then relationship shifts to memory, space, as each person assumes a life literally. And then that the feelings in family are feelings. Not direction, not this, not that, but the feelings there, they themselves give a kind of direction. So let's say we assume the mystery to be normal, that we can feel so strongly for someone in their absence, where it's against the rules of science, that absence could be as strong as presence, which has electric fields and stuff like that. But that absence can have a profound thing of desire, of recreation, and this and that. And you start to see the forces that exist within one's life and how they've come into play in your life without ever know how remarkable the forces that have come into play in one's life as one has shifted different expressions. And one becomes aware of one's own life, not only as one's existence, but as almost a creative, almost entirely a creative expression, where the literal aspect is only part of it. The literal part of the play that you're putting on is the door where you have to pay $3 in order to get in order to pay the rent and so on like that, but you're then free to share the experience. So somehow something is handling the expenses so that the experience can be shared. When I say what is money to us, it seems to me that money is to be free of money. Whatever aspect that can be, if you have some, let's say a collection of art that has come to me or whatever, that kind of allows me, I feel it has value out there in some way if we ever needed it and something like that. So there is, but just in your own way, this money making constant to make more and more and more is written into the social, the addiction is written into the story. You see how deeply money runs through the story. But you also see that there can be a relationship in a moment that says, hey baby, you want to try this? And they say, where will we get the money? And we'll say, we'll figure it out. I mean, so somehow that naivete comes where the feeling is there, and then we'll figure out the doing. But generally the doing comes first. And generally the doing says, nah, man, okay. Because you see the doer that owns the story and becomes addicted. And you see that when there is a feeling to create something, it's a creative thing. It takes the form of a business, but it's a creative act between friends or lovers. And that somehow creates an attraction. As it literalizes and becomes a thing, then it's subject to thingness. But originally there was a purity in the feeling. And it was the kind of feeling that allowed one to create without it being a possessive in that. And so friendship is usually the medium in that. Even if it's a store or a business, it takes the form of that. When you look at it, you can see it's people who feel a certain way and then they found a way to create a business.
Yeah.
As long as the business doesn't violate that feeling. So when there is an issue, you see that's what's happened. That the literalness of the business is confronting you with a soulful issue, which is normal, but is not normal for you. Because then, upon reflection, that's why I say there's that hey baby conversation, where something forces an examination that you see. If you're going to carry on with it, it's somehow you're all into it, without being forced. Everyone's free to have their view. So it's an interesting thing, a parallel way to the rest of the world, which is not organized or figured out in any way, but still we're thinking our lives are normal. Most of us that I see you all, we kind of have a parallel life. It's a life that's allowed some observation of the rest of the world going by. And to some degree, you see the rest of the world that they portray in the news and that they're portraying here. You can see somehow we're in it, but not of it. We're in it only because we feel the broken heart of the kind of violence that runs through each story.
Mm.
But it's the broken heart of the helpless.
Mm.
That somehow you see that the system is addicted to this movement.
Yeah.
Hmm? And every week it'll come up with one that if you look at it, you say,
Yeah.
holy shit.
Yeah.
And holy shit is what it is, because it is holy. Something is holy. There is a happening that is taking place. And yet it's bullshit. The reasons for it, and this is that, and my flag, and my country. And you say, come on, man, this is lame. Can you just see how absolutely full of shit it is? Why you want to give me this, that you're a superior civilization and you're some lame dudes? Okay. So it seems that way. But then once you go in, put your foot into the story, that becomes the reality. And when that becomes the reality, that you have orders and it's organized and continuity and there's an enemy and the literalizing of the enemy, and somehow the enemy wants to mess with you and you'll die for it, so you enter into a very interesting grid that is more like a movie when you're out of it, but as you enter into it, it's not always noble like it sounds when you're out of it. It sounds like it's a noble cause, but when you're in it, it starts to become cheesier and cheesier feeling. Because you start to see that they're just people. And just people, but they're playing trumpets around them, and they're sharing flags, and they're doing this, and they're doing that. But if you're in a room with them and this and that, you see that they're just people, man. Okay. So you see somehow they've created this remarkable, monumental thing. But as you meet it personally, you also meet a kind of vulnerability that you meet personally.
Yes.
And so then you'll see we'll meet people in a different way. So then even if you trace it back to your childhood, you'll start to see that you were meeting people in a different way. Maybe people who had authority, but as you met them personally, you started to see they were people. And you then had a holy shit moment, like I say, I'm on a ship and there's a captain, and we're looking for the enemy, and aircraft carrier in the nighttime, and he's arguing with his wife and his kids, and I said, holy shit, how could this guy run like 200 planes and this and that, and so you start to see the normalcy. The normalcy is somehow
Of holy shit.
that as soon as you step into the story, you'll meet, you step into the closet. And when you step into the closet, you start to meet other dimensions of, and so when you meet a world that on the surface, it looks like it's an organized country and it's an organized this, and their tanks are coming and this and that. And then you look at the guy's face and you can see that he's lacking certain cell salts and that he's kind of neurotic and he hasn't made love in a long time. Not sex, but he hasn't made love. He hasn't said, hey, baby, how you doing? Or anything like that. That it really needs a smack. Schmuck. Okay. But you also see that the whole world is going to have to move around one little argument. If you were in the room and you say, Schmuck, what are you doing, man? Why are you taking it out on the world? You know, it's like you've abstracted the world when you got a personal hang up. Okay. And so let's say it has to play out. 50 years later, they'll say, and Putin had this personal hang up. He was having an argument with his girlfriend at the time. Okay. And they say, the real reason. Okay. And so there's history and mystery. Because as you visit the experience personally, you start to see the commonality of experience. And yet they've made history into some magical place, but at the same time it is, because you see the effect of the action. Where in the moment you didn't see the historical effect that it would bring on the situation. But if you're in the moment, you see the simplicity of the moment, the complexity of the moment. And then if you see the historical manifestation of that thing and you say, holy shit, I was there when it happened. And then you see how it reverberated and reconnected through time and space. Then it's like seeing your child grow up into an adult, or someone you knew 50 years ago and what they're doing now in this situation. And you see there's a kind of holy shit in the passage. We get glimpses of holy shit that inherently in the literal story that's in front of us, and inherently in the conspiracies around the literal story. As you look through it, you see another dimension of an experience that's happening in the story where you don't own the story as much, but there's the deeper one can be with it, and not in a forced way, and I say why? Because in forced way means motive. And it is in fact coming from a relaxed space. It is not the literalness of revelation. It is a kind of atmosphere of revelation within the norm, where you see the history and the mystery in front of you. And you also see a future from the present.
Mm.
And I feel that that's what some of us are experiencing in the moment, and that there are some lovely moments also.
Yes. Magical.
And scary.
Yes.
And let's see.
Very scary.
But I like that, funny when Kai had said that when she had a feeling and she released a story from 20 some odd years ago,
Yeah, that was beautiful.
and the moments meant, that has started to happen now very strongly in and with many different relationships.
Mm-hmm.
You know, just as you mentioned that around that, it's just been hey baby moment.
Mm.
And
Yeah.
it didn't have a plan, and it didn't have this, and it didn't have that. It was free to have a plan if it wished, but it didn't have a plan, or it didn't have any of that. It had more like releasing the story.
Wow, such a yummy feeling.
And yet you see that no matter how one tried, it had to be true. It kind of, so somehow true is not a channel that you can just turn on like that.
Right.
True comes more, it seems, from a dream state or a lucid dreaming. I've been exploring again the lucid dreaming state when, again, since I read that article, and it freed the sleep from me, you have to go back to sleep. But you can just lie there, and that becomes what used to be a pain in the ass, is just to lie there in the middle of the night. Now has become a pleasure to some extent, because you're starting to hear things in the room and the circumstance around yourself or whatever. And I'm doing that breathing, but it does seem that there's a kind of dreaming coming, because then I don't remember. Maybe 2 hours has passed or something, and I don't, I remember it and I don't remember it simultaneously. So it seems that there's a kind of lucid dreaming space. So that was nice. It released the sleeping to be a creative process rather than a condition that you had to do, but that it was natural in your body.
Yeah.
and that you, and in the life that you were living, there is something, a way that style of life that you're creating. So to some extent, it did reveal a lot of problems that would say, holy shit, you're forcing yourself into an 8-hour day, an 8-hour sleep day, and so on like that. And that force may create its own condition. So then once you, to me, once you see a kind of pattern of behavior, seeing it frees you from the story. Like I said, once I was taking those lozenges and you saw how much sugar was in them, and everybody was taking them, they were supposed to be healthy. Then you saw how much sugar, as soon as you saw how much sugar in each one, forget it, you know.
Yeah.
So you see, once you see it's kind of a poison for you.
Yeah.
You don't
can't
need much
deny-
of an explanation, huh? It's second nature to us now to release it.
But the people who sell the product, they really don't have time to care. They can't, they're so busy being busy.
Yes,
That-
but then you also see that then people are coming from a motive. You see the motive, and you see the motive as continuity. So let's say then you enter with your present, and you say, no, it comes from a genuine place. And that genuine place may even be telling a joke together and everybody laughing at the same time. But what you're doing is your presence is attempting to create a genuineness in the situation. So it's no longer someone taking advantage or a trip or this lonely, all these forces entering into the story. So what you say, hold it now. If we share intimacy, we share intimacy because we are sane in our way, not because poor me and my mother did that. And so now the shared space is very much as if we are making a film together. It's an agreement that this is a creative act before it is anything. It's that somehow it's a no bullshit feeling, and then we'll see where it takes us creatively, just a little inch away. And yet it takes a lifetime to come back into the story from the energy
yes.
into the story, which is not rules and regulations, but your presence. Your presence then is asking for genuineness. Now you could say, hey, look, I'm going to be 82-year-old French lady. Don't bullshit with me now. Don't put me back into some bullshit story when I got some soulful shit happening to me personally. Is that nice to say that way? That's very spiritual, isn't it? So if you're going to have me in the story, and I love to be, it's because there's a genuine thing happening between us.
Yeah.
Don't give me your sad old man shit and you're this, and all of you have had a cool life. Now, if we mush together, it's because there's something that we're sharing. And that means what? That the story starts from friendship. Then the friendship means a feeling shared, or a thou feeling, that somehow the other person's hurt may be yours also. You would give them advice if they were in pain. So somehow there is a shared space. The shared space, then from the shared space, then you can also, the doing can come out of that. And somehow the shared space creates what looks like a magical space that didn't pre-exist before. But the shared feeling is essential to a certain perception in the situation. But it's still coming from when there's the first feelings of affection like that, there's an I and thou I experience in the situation where you care for the other as much as you would care for yourself, even more in some cases. So you see a remarkable creative process going on in life. When it has your perception in it, there's another dimension that it's about where it's not only around survival, but you start to see that hidden in survival were creative dimensions of existence. And that people speak to each other in dreams, they speak to each other in absence, that dying is an aspect that releases energies in the story. that usually cannot be fully perceived while they are literally happening.
Mm.
But as there's creative space in the dying process, it creates reflective space in situations. So you start to see not only a life being lived, but you also see creative processes on many levels. But you also see the attempts to figure out what is this life about and what happens. And then you're viewing it in your own life, what happened. And you say, well, what happened? Do I see parallels to these situations? It becomes this and that. But as I'm looking at it, I am also seeing that the body is an aspect of the experience. That somehow there are more conversations going on in absence and in memory than there are literally happening. And that much of the friendships are in fact memories where people take home a feeling that they've shared and that enters into the dialogue of their lives. And you are privy to this life lived on a few levels, where you also are memory. And you also see evidence, I guess, I'm not on Facebook and these other things, but you see evidence on Facebook of these, where memory is becoming reality. And more, and the literalization of it. But from my perspective, observing you in the last few weeks, Urja, I've observed this process happening. The simultaneity of the living and dying process. And the people engaged in it having some level of understanding of it, but basically that somehow it's in the story. But it's not only a question of tiptoeing around something or this or that, but it is a question of the person's presence is more like a mirror, is bringing a reflection of a dimension that is in everyone, but is happening for the person strongly. It brings home a happening. That's why you see a lot of this heartbreak in the news, brings home the vulnerability to some of existence, that it's subject to the smallest things, but you also see the broken heart running through the story. And the naturalness of the broken heart running through the story. And that there's inherent experience, that a life has a whole experience in it. And when it reaches helplessness, and it sees something in the helplessness where it can't automatically create a helper or doer or something like that, but it sees the human condition.
Yeah.
Then you experience a broken heart without having earned a broken heart, but perceptively, you are sent to a place. And you see a condition that runs through the existence. And you also see it before it has a cause. That somehow the broken heart enters into the story and then assumes identities around it, reasons for it. But there's a date with an experience, it does seem. You start to visit life, not organized that way, but existing on many levels. And once it's released from the identity, in other words, once you start to meditate or do this in life or shift this or some changes happen where you're no longer is dominated by one's history, and you start to see other dimensions from your history enter into the life. You find out more about your parents and what happened and what really happened and this and that, and you start to see an understanding entering into your life. Any peep of perception or understanding shifts the plane. And then there's a question that comes, that will come in one's life, a who am I question when one finds themselves contractually in a prison. When they're simply free to walk away or just say, I'll see you later, carry on, or this or that. And yet that's not, even though they're free, there's even a deeper thing happening than that. And that one's presence is caring for something. by the presence, is caring for something. And they say, why? I said, because the presence won't allow it to be too artificial without it, or to be bullshit. So somehow there is a bullshit detector in the one who is kind of creating the novel or creating the movie or creating the score, where you see if you're creating the score, if you give into a money maker or a bullshitter or whatever, it's where you're trying to reach authenticity in yourself. So when you are doing that, then you start to see money in a different light. And I feel that the money, when you see it in a different light, it's coming because it's no longer literally a job oriented. Your life somehow is a creative act. And a byproduct of your life is your job is your life. Your work is your life. If you take on a job, it's still a creative thing you're doing. It's not literally a contract forever.
Right.
It is part of your creative expression. So somehow, perceptively, when it's second nature to you now, and you also see it has been happening in its own way to the degree that you're aware of it, that somehow you've kept a life and expression going that has relative freedom to it. In a world that's becoming, according to its news around it, becoming increasingly weird and isolated and identity oriented, when it's the very freedom from identity orientation to explore what this life is about, one had a basic identity so that they can explore. You see that love feeling cuts through identity separation in weird ways, or feeling, or even a friendly feel. You can be in an Indian weird circumstance, and a shared feeling can cut through a whole circumstance. That would be impossible. But a shared feeling of friendship allows a whole assimilation of a different culture. So there is already a remarkably creative process simply in living. The discoveries of those dimensions then invites a shared space.
Mhm.
To be able to share what you would share with family only if you passed away and they remembered you or read something or saw a letter or contacted you that way, but then to share that while you're in the form, I would say that you've been creating memories in the last month or so. Where the difference between the everyday and the memories is not so much. You see, that you then see the real creative expression, where the difference between future memories and the momentary action are kind of wedded to each other. There is a purity in seeing it, because then it kind of becomes natural to expressing it, not employing it so much, but expressing it. What do you say, Urja? Is this too complicated a description?
No, it's you that I'm
Well, I've been watching it to some degree here, but again, it may the everyday may sound too complicated that way. But if you experience what you've just experienced this year, or, let's say, what Kai, just what you've gone through in the last 2 years, because you remember what we were talking about then? Okay. Somehow, time has passed. All of this has passed, it seems. And somehow, what has happened? The tragedy of this, the explosion of this, and all of that has happened. Actually, it has happened out there to some degree. The questions that we'll have is, should I get back? Not sure. Those are the questions that's always come to us in some way. Well, from the older guys of us, or the natural. But it's not even for me, I said it'll happen accidentally within a circumstance or whatever, where I don't. But it'll assume some grace. So coming from the grace is not laid out for you. But I say it's not motive oriented when it's coming from the grace, and it's coming more from a feeling. It may seem naive, but I feel that once those feelings are there, it's like some of the exercise I do where I may lift the weights on that vibration machine, but it's relaxed body, not muscular. So I've been doing relaxed body thing. So generally, for me, it's coming from the energy, not from the survival, and not from what to do or this or that. I feel that my body and myself are having a conversation that once there's a kind of agreement, we can work with. So I do feel that something like that is happening where there is an intimate relationship with your own body where you can agree to get up in the middle of the night and read something if you wish, or do something and go back to sleep, or play with it. Okay, so you released from the literal world, and you see that you have time to sleep and shift and do this, and you can reinvent. And in fact, you have done that. You become aware that you have invented yourself, and you've come to think of it as normal. But you have invented yourself, and you have invented a situation, and everyone's in an invented situation, and they're waiting for certain cues and this and that. And it's a stage. You see the art of the circumstance you're in, and there are certain elements that will maybe release the story. Okay. And you see it happening. You remarked and you saw it happening where just the folks may want to do this instead of that, or they're following this way, but you see somehow what's keeping you related literally to something is because it's true for you. If in fact that has shifted and you're free and everyone's free to go and you see it sane. So let's say you're working in a theater of circumstance that somehow it's creating a mutual perception for everyone, that everyone in the circumstance is free. And that if they're together, it's not around so much the fear, it is around because there is something else happening. It's circumstanced around fear. But there are people who feel for each other where the feelings are shifting and the circumstance is shifting. And they're managing the feeling. And it's remarkable in retrospect when one will be able to write about it. But while one is in it, you are experiencing what the actor will experience in the play. And that you know how many years of hard work it would be to experience our own life as an actor. Let me do Carrie as an actor. And it's like, holy shit. He's got family. Has he got any money stashed or anything? And they say, no, you'll have to do Carrie on the fly. You really have to do Carrie if you're going to do Carrie. Okay, so I say, holy shit, I don't know if I could do Carrie. It would require like real method acting and push-ups and soul searching and everything to do Carrie. And Carrie's doing Carrie pretty easily. He's smiling, he's talking shit. Now, if I was to do Carrie, I said, holy shit, man, it'd be very hard to do that. And then I said, okay, I'm going to meet the parents of Carrie in Hawaii together, and we're going to goof together for a while. I say that it's natural for them would be an act, a creative act, that would reveal each person's personal life and circumstance and situation and what goes into the social dynamic. That's so simple, and yet is remarkably complex for the body. And it seems complex because there are so many hidden movements that go into the natural that you discover them when you lose them. And there can also be something in a relationship that can hurt so bad that all the sentiments that were built up around it all of a sudden disappear to a hurt, as if it's there in your body. So I'm saying the life itself is a mystery that reveals itself in the circumstance that you're in. But as you perceive it, it has an effect on the circumstance around it, because it shifts what you're doing into more of a creative presence. That somehow what's happening for you at this stage of the life, if they're going to incorporate you into the story, you're asking for the story to be genuine, no longer based on psychological structures or hurts or shit, but that somehow there's a genuineness to it because you are engaged in a genuineness in your own life. Mm-hmm. And that there is a reflective element that's intelligent in one's life that has a kind of soul searching into it. It's usually a fearful of soul searching, but soul searching coming from a different place adds dimensions to the living process. And I think relationships are then formulating around the soul searching or reflection. So I feel that's what was meant by sensuality over the literal sexuality, is that when you meet someone in a soul searching element, then there is an intimacy that is not coming from the history or this or that. An intimacy meant it could even be a conversation on a park bench, but somehow there's a shared vibe, a shared existence. So I feel then that that has a sensuality to it, to me, because of its freedom of expression. But it also has a vow to be pure in some way. That it's not coming from the ego, it's not coming from the ownership or the trip or the fears or any of the psycho-structural elements that exist out there, but it's coming from a kind of freedom where it's no longer historically bound, but it has a kind of conversation like, hey, baby, do you want to do this thing? Or where people are consciously on board with something. That's a creative act. That I feel happens even in absence, even in memory. And what is that? Someone passed away and you still have a love. Someone is in Paris and you're in Woodstock and you still have a love. So you start to see the qualitative difference between someone passing away and someone being 1,000 miles away that you're in love with and you still have the feeling for. You start to experience almost like a fine wine taste and so on. You see in your memories a creative dimension in your memories. And they're not memories, they're in fact inside of you. You are carrying this experience of having lived a life in you. And so that's why there are so many dimensions hidden in plain sight, because the state that you're in allows you access to something. And when it allows you access in something, it's transformative. There's an aha moment where you see what you're really in. And that the flux in your life was also inherently in the expression. Now, Segway said he found some tapes of Johnny D singing with, I forget who the guitarist is there. Have you seen those? Are they on YouTube or something, or on his website? Or Kerry, do you know?
There's some on YouTube.
Yeah.
From Woodstock. He had a TV show for a little while.
Well, okay, but see the thread, see the creative thread that runs through the story, you know,
Yeah.
and the dialogue and so on like that, and you say, "Holy shit! You just went through that whole thing. You just did Kerry."
Yeah.
How the hell did you navigate that, man?
Who knows?
Okay, so let's say it didn't come with a map. And Derek,
No.
how did you do Derek? What kind of mantra did you use to do Derek?
It was Humsa.
Hamsa mantra. You know what Hamsa is?
I have a picture of a crane who can drink the white out of the milk.
No, no, a swan.
Swan, yeah.
Swan,
I
yeah.
am that.
Yeah. Yeah. So that was Hamsa. Hmm. So that was the how you did the mantra. You did hum through breathing in and like that through the mouth. That's how he breathed. So then there was once you had that down pat where you did it all the time, it was patterned on. There was something like the Russian Orthodox and Greek Orthodox Catholics did a kind of Jesus prayer where they would do it by breathing. And they would do their prayers by breathing normally, by just going about their days, they were doing their prayers by breathing.
That's great.
So a lot associated the breathing that once it was happening. So once we did the mantras, then there was Hamsa, then there was Dreen, that was Shiva, D-R-E, like 5 E's and Dreen, like that mantra, Sa. And then there was Harim, and I think that was Shakti. And it was intense. I mean, you did that in the open air, with not too much clothes on there, and also, but you were doing mantras, and then at 3 in the morning, you would also get up to do that or to sing mantras. They had whole songs that were supposedly transformative. Until after a period of time, when I wake up and I say, "What the hell am I doing? What the hell is going on here?" Okay, because you lose 40 pounds and you have dysentery and but you're doing something spiritual. But then you kind of wake up and see it's not its jive, but for you, it has to send you to a place where you see it was an attempt to make meaning of the life. And then somehow, and then in retrospect, you see what happened. It wasn't full of shit. It was an attempt. And so it took on all this identity and the Ganges and the mountains and this and that and living like that. And then for a moment, you see the move is bullshit for you. It still won't, it doesn't have that answer. It's only in the failure of the thing. But you also see that in retrospect that the failure wasn't important. It wasn't failure. It was an experience that was necessary in the journey.
Mm-hmm.
Where somehow you couldn't find any means to shift the plane or something like that. And even the most radical means where the everydayness of Indian life is so whacked to a person from America, if you're living in the countryside and it normalizes, but at the same time, you're still a stranger in a strange land. So let's say the journey, the awareness of the journey is when something shifts that seemed to be solid that you were in, and then the plane shifts, and it causes a kind of soul searching. And the soul searching won't allow you to go into a situation artificially any longer. That somehow you're only coming from the creative space in yourself. You're no longer coming from the prophet, the good guy, the guy that wants this, the guy. So you start to lose that guy that literally thinks that way. That's normal to think that way. So what does happen in the experience, in the India experience, was you shifted the plane of thinking a certain way about life. And it didn't give you another way of thinking about life that way, literally that way, but it also shifted the plane for you where survival was not the strongest suit of existence. That somehow you had to figure out a way to earn and somehow you had to figure a way to navigate. But that was in care of a genuineness in the life. And you see that much of it was an exploration of relationships, an absence and in presence, and the energized element that happens with it. And then you start to experience, even once you explore it, you start to find dimensions in absence that are as powerful as presence. But discovering that brings a kind of, when I say sacred, I mean the kind of sacredness that comes with being an artist about your work. There's always a challenge not to sell it out or to explore it further, but at the need for a flow. So there is a conversation going on with someone who's looking at the work. So there is a conversation and a moderation that is taking place. But at the same time, one is caring for something fairly pure in themselves. There is a device in you that is allowing you to navigate the world. And it is a device that can reason, can figure, can. You see that your own life is a creative process that is taken for granted as normal. And in seeing that, just the perception of it starts to shift the picture a bit. Because then one is no longer as strictly bound to karma of the situation or inheriting a literal situation. But somehow, it's a shared life. What do you say, Kerry? You want to continue doing Kerry or you want to do Derek?
He looks like he's in a beautiful place, Kerry.
Oh yeah, I'm in St. Kitts in the Caribbean with some friends hanging out. We got an invitation to come hang out for a week or so. Down here is beautiful.
Yeah.
Oh,
Nice.
the poor dude.
Poor guy.
Well, then,
You guys want to see the-
but then,
Wow.
Urja, where are you, Urja? I'm in Boulder, Colorado. Okay.
Wow, look at the view he has.
Yeah, nice to see.
Exquisite, yeah.
How long have you been there?
Just for about a week. Just staying a few more days till Saturday.
It's okay. It seems good.
No.
So you didn't win that on Judge Judy, did you?
No, just friends that are really sweet people and invited us to hang out.
I'm glad. That looks okay. Everyone seems okay here today? Everyone, we just got this guy to put in a new computer service or something like that. So that should be nice. We'll see if that works out or not. Hmm?
Yeah, it should be crisper to the viewers.
Yeah, it should be crisper, he said. Everything else okay? Any questions at all? Anybody else out there that has, that I can't see?
Jimmy and Sophia and Kason. I found that Johnny D video.
Oh, you did?
Yeah.
Wonder
With
if
the
I could.
guitar,
What?
with the guitarist.
I don't know if I can share my screen. Do you want to see it?
Yeah, let's see it then.
Wait, let me see. Let me pull it up again.
I think he does. She Loves Me and Norwegian Wood, a couple Beatles songs with him.
Oh, really? Who
Derek
was
knows how to do it. You can ask Derek.
It's pretty jazzy. It's pretty
Do you
out
want
there.
to share your screen, Derek? Wait, let me see.
Sure. It says host is
What
disabled.
happened? You want to see these folks?
Yeah, how do I allow you? Wait, hold on.
Should be a little arrow next.
Allow. She wants to
Okay,
show us
multiple
some-
participants. Oh, advanced sharing.
Where?
I don't know. Let's see if, does that let you do it?
Click on a camera.
Yes.
Oh, you have a meeting? Okay. We'll
But
see
I'm
you
coming
later.
back in a second.
Oh, there's Johnny D. There.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, here we go. Can you hear it?
Up a little bit.
Oh,
Can you turn it up?
Maybe. Maybe not.
is that the word I've seen? Yeah. Oh, that's in Woodstock, huh?
Yeah, he had a TV show back in the 90s on public access, apparently.
I had a TV show in Woodstock.
What's that?
I had a TV show with the tarot. I would pull a card and I invite people to call.
What period is this?
He's good. He's good.
This is like 90, 96 or something, 95, 96.
Yeah.
I believe so.
Yeah.
I don't know what's going on now.
That's kind of cool.
I think remember the video cuts out.
When did you meet? When did you meet Urja, Johnny D?
In 95.
95. So then I.
That's the year I met you, yeah.
Yeah, you met me. So I had met
Well,
him.
I
before that.
called you. I met him on a bench. He said you should call my teacher. And I called
Huh.
you.
It's the same thing that happened to me.
Yeah,
I was
it's-
covered with goosebump.
That's
I
Well,
knew
it
it
was
was
a-
a real thing. I knew you were the real thing, Danny.
No, I'm just strong here. But look how strong all these guys have been, huh? And Johnny, you would have to grab him and just stop already, bite him on the nose, snap out. Okay, but not actually snap out of it. It was profound. It was something that kind of had one, because you see, you were related to the energy in the person, and then there's the story. So at the same time, the energy of the person, the relationship is to reveal. You see that somehow the connection of the literalness is to conceal. There's a movement of concealing and revealing that is creatively taking place when the relationship is not literal, but it's a creative one, because it exists and it doesn't exist simultaneously. In the genuineness, it exists, but to be genuine in the literal world is to be very foolish, because that's not the way the literal world works. You have to have a job, and you have to do this, you have to, okay. So somehow in the literal world, you have to kind of compromise the creative aspect to the survival one. But in the survival dimension, or in the creative dimension, survival comes from a different play. It's one of the challenges creatively, because it requires sometimes soul searching. Whenever you have to compromise something that's dear to you or perceptively dear to you, is a soul searching moment. Whenever you have to compromise the creative energy towards the survival one. So you see a brilliant artistic movement in one's life. And you get a glimpse of the creative processes of relationship. And that it's always in flux, because it is in flux. It's not in flux because of any behavioral problem. Flux is the nature, even in one's own body, it's in flux. One's life is in flux, and relationship then has a I and thou level of flux, where somehow the movement of another affects you even deeper than your own movements affects. It reaches a place that can't be reached in absence and in presence. So when you meet the mystery in the history, then you're meeting what your life has been. There has been both a historical life of the literalness, and there has been a mystery existence that you become aware of in times. And it can be as simple as that your father had cancer and you have the same cancer years later or whatever, and you see that remarkably it's in the body or it's in the situation. You were born with it, or was there all along. You discover other processes in your life or parallel lives. And in discovering the parallel lives, one kind of almost comes back into the life from a creative place, where it's not so much around survival in the literal sense, but it's around that somehow the depth of one's life is being lived. Okay, shall we call it a day? Okay. Nice to see everyone again. I hope to see you.
Oh,
I'll
Thank
see
you, Dan.
with Derek tomorrow or Sunday. At 1.
Thank you, Dad. Good to see you.
Trust you're okay, Kai, and take care.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, everyone. Keep
Thank
in
you, Danny.
Thanks, Danny.
Bye-bye.
You,
Bye.
yes.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Bye.